The attacks. On September 11, 2001, American Airlines Flight 11 took off from Boston at 7:59 in the morning. Moments after the seatbelt sign was switched off, two men got up from the second row, approached two female flight attendants, and stabbed them. More hijackers broke into the cockpit, overpowering the pilots. In just minutes, the 5 hijackers of Flight 11 had gained full control of the plane and its passengers. September 11th started as an ordinary morning for the thousands of men and women who worked in the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, the tallest skyscrapers in New York City. But all that changed at 8:46 when Flight 11 slammed into the North Tower. The plane ripped through 7 floors, sending the tower swaying and instantly killing hundreds of people. These 5 hijackers weren't working alone. About 15 minutes later, a second hijacked plane, United Airlines Flight 175, slammed into the South Tower. As people frantically raced to escape the burning buildings, some even jumping from windows, rescue personnel rushed to the site. Almost all of Lower Manhattan was evacuated, creating confusion on the streets. News of the disaster spread quickly. At schools and workplaces all over the world, people stopped what they were doing to turn on the television or call loved ones. Then, at 9:59, the South Tower collapsed. Half an hour later, the North Tower collapsed too, shrouding Lower Manhattan in dust and smoke. Soon, news stations were reporting the fates of 2 more hijacked planes. One had flown into the Pentagon, the nation's military headquarters in Washington, D.C. The other plane, headed for either the White House or the Capitol building, had crashed in rural Pennsylvania after a brave attempt by passengers to take back control. By 10:30 that morning, nearly 3,000 people had perished, with thousands more injured or missing. New York City's skyline had been drastically altered. Washington, D.C. was in chaos, and people all over the world were stunned and terrified. 9/11 had become a day that changed the world. Who was behind the attacks?
Investigators soon uncovered strong evidence that a Muslim extremist named Osama bin Laden and his terrorist group, Al-Qaeda, were responsible for the attacks.
American President George W. Bush responded by declaring a global war on terrorism. This war was aimed at bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, as well as the Taliban, a militant Islamic group that had taken over most of Afghanistan. The American government believed that the Taliban was supporting bin Laden and Al-Qaeda and sponsoring terrorist training camps.
As Muslims, bin Laden and the members of Al-Qaeda follow the religion of Islam, along with over 1 billion other people in the world. But as extremists, they believe that American life is offensive to the teachings of Islam. In their eyes, it is the duty of Muslims to destroy American people and ways of life through violent and extreme means. This is very different from the messages of peace and kindness practiced by most Muslims.
The U.S. and the world respond. On October 7, 2001, the U.S. and its allies attacked Kabul, Afghanistan. The purpose of the attack was to capture bin Laden and bring down the Taliban. Over the next 2 years, a total of 53 countries joined the U.S. in its fight against terrorism. President Bush also announced the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. Working with other federal agencies, this department tightened security along America's borders, as well as inside airports and other public places. Government employees were put in charge of screening baggage, and passengers had to pass through metal detectors and have their luggage X-rayed. People all over the world were no longer allowed to carry sharp objects on flights. In addition, the U.S. government passed the Patriot Act. This act gave more freedom to law enforcement agencies to search people's telephone and email communications, as well as their medical, financial, and library records. It also granted immigration authorities more power to detain and deport immigrants suspected of terrorism-related acts. Many people strongly objected to this expansion of government power. They were concerned that it would lead to discrimination of immigrants and violate people's rights to privacy. Ground Zero. The area where the Twin Towers had collapsed became known as Ground Zero. Workers and volunteers spent months here, searching for victims among smoking mounds of rubble. Each day, trucks and barges transported thousands of tons of material from Ground Zero to a nearby landfill, so workers could sift through the debris for human remains as well as evidence from the planes. For many workers, this was a difficult and upsetting task. After the areas of the attacks were cleaned up, it was time for rebuilding. At the Pentagon, the damaged section of the building was restored within a year, and a memorial was built a few miles away. In Pennsylvania, at the field where the fourth plane crashed, the government decided to build a memorial, a chapel with 40 wind chimes to honor the plane's 40 passengers and crew members. It took a long time to decide what to do about the World Trade Center. Some people thought the towers should be rebuilt exactly as before, like the Pentagon. Others felt the site and its ruins should become a monument to the people who died that day, like the field in Pennsylvania. In the end, it was decided to erect one new tower and place a memorial where the old towers had once stood. After darkness, light. On September 11, 2001, 19 hijackers committed the worst acts of terrorism ever aimed at the United States, changing that country and the world forever. Each year on September 11th, Americans find ways to remember the victims. Many people attend memorial services. Children often wear red, white, and blue to school, the colors of the American flag, and raise money for projects that help others in their communities. In a town in Pennsylvania, some victims' family members decided to honor their loved ones by building a garden. At this garden, completed in 2006, visitors can take a memorial journey to remember all those who were killed on 9/11. The journey starts in a tear-shaped area and winds past fragments from the Twin Towers. Then it passes a wall etched with the victims' names. Finally, the walkway leads visitors away from these signs of sorrow to a cluster of young trees that stand for hope. The theme of this journey captures America's struggle to find hope following the tragedy. Its theme is After Darkness, Light.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
Not appear that there's any kind of an effort up there yet. Now remember, oh my God.
Oh my God.
That looks like a second plane.
The victims were in airplanes or in their offices. Secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors.
These young men were not ready to die. We're looking at financial center. Between us, 2 broken windows.
It's a very haunting description that Bob Kerr just gave of that low-flying aircraft near the White House, and one can only wonder if that was something that ultimately ended up in the Pentagon.
We just saw a live picture of what seemed to be a portion of the building falling away.
The Pentagon is being evacuated. There is a large fire there, and that is the smoke you see in the shot that you are looking at now.
Let's go to the trade tower again, because, John, we now have what do we have? We don't...
It looks like a new plume, a new large plume of smoke.
And there's, you can see, perhaps the second tower, the front tower, the top portion of which is collapsing. Good Lord. There are no words.
I'm going to interrupt you, Senator McCain. These are the first pictures we have in. This is from Somerset County, Pennsylvania. This is where the United Airlines flight, I believe it is 176, went down.
Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat, but they have failed.
Good evening. Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda, and a terrorist who's responsible for the murder of thousands of innocent men, women, and children. It was nearly 10 years ago that a bright September day was darkened by the worst attack on the American people in our history. Nearly 3,000 citizens taken from us, leaving a gaping hole in our hearts. On September 11th, 2001, in our time of grief, the American people came together. We offered our neighbors a hand, and we offered the wounded our blood. We reaffirmed our ties to each other and our love of community and country. On that day, no matter where we came from, what God we prayed to, or what race or ethnicity we were united as one American family.